Okay, so here we're going to do our fruit, which is in this case a pumpkin. And I've created a new layer. Well, first I made a background layer, made it a slight off-white. And then I created a new layer where I'm going to do my really rough sketch with a very low opacity, small brush. And now, again, just laying in things. If I don't like it, I can erase. And I'm not really worried about clean lines. I'm just getting the proportions down, really. Created a new layer, little bit heavier brush, so from 30 to 60 on the opacity, and I'm really kind of just defining just so I know which lines are good lines and which lines are bad lines, and this is going to be kind of my final form where I'll begin to build and layer off of. Alright, so I turned off that sketch layer and now I'm just left with my image that I like here. So underneath this layer, so I've got the line base, and then underneath this layer I'm going to do in some localized color, so pumpkin color things. And I don't actually end up doing a great job keeping these organized, but right now I'm just selecting a bunch of colors, making a palette for me to use. Colors that I think I'm going to want to be able to quickly reference as I go through this process. So right now I'm laying in a local color, which is just orange for a pumpkin, and I'm laying that in underneath. And what you're going to see me do repeatedly is go ahead and click Option, and that turns your brush into an eyedropper. So if you hold the Option key, it will convert your brush to an eyedropper, and I can quickly select each of these individual colors and move them back to painting without having to click on lots of different things. So now I'm adding in some general rough shadows, and this really should have been done on a separate layer, but I kind of forgot, and you'll see me eventually here kind of just flatten everything and go from there and treat it like a normal painting almost. A relatively high opacity brush, and that's because I've already got all of the highlights and colors selected here that I'm going to be using. Any blending I can do later, or just use very similar colors. Again, putting in some general highlights. We've got our 50% orange. That's like the normal value of the pumpkin, so I've got areas in that are going to fall into shadow, or ahead of that, and then the other part's going to be also light. And we'll do our darkest and our lightest stuff after that. So I had just flattened that down, and I'm just now building on top of everything rather than kind of having to mix around with different layers. Here I'm adding in some reflective light off the table that's bouncing back onto the pumpkin. And here just some smaller detail stuff. I do have the opacity and size of the brush, in this case, dependent on the pressure of the pen. Here I've switched to the smudge tool and just kind of smoothing and cleaning up some transitions between colors. You can also use the color mixing brush, which is just a subset of the brush tool. Again, zooming in to get more details, a little bit heavier, harder, sharper brush to really pop in some of the highlights and ultimately texture. I'm not going to do a super detailed final render of this. This is the basic process that you would continue throughout and get more and more detail and more and more precise. But this is the general process you'll go through for this still life fruit drawing. Again, reworking some of the shadow, a little bit more contrast. Getting a little bit more color and variation in there. And that's something that just going to add more depth. Now I'm onto the color mixing brush just to kind of even things out. Again, more detail and contrast. Just building up that range from that middle, kind of 50% middle orange that was there. And, from a distance, it looks certainly like a pumpkin. And I can just eyedropper the background and paint that, and there we go. Then I crop if I need to crop and save.